High drama in our nation's capital. A vote was expected tonight in the House on the GOP bill to repeal and replace Obamacare, but it's not happening now until perhaps tomorrow or later. Many conservatives, Republicans are still withholding support, leaving their party short of the votes needed to pass it. Republicans are scheduled to meet behind closed doors at 7 p.m. Eastern. The president still working hard today to try to strike a deal. Let's go to Chief White House correspondent John Roberts with the latest. John.
Dana, good afternoon to you. The White House is now expecting that a vote will happen in the House tomorrow, but I hasten to remind you they were expecting that a vote was going to happen today. The president will be meeting in just a few minutes' time with members of what's called the Tuesday Group. It's a group of about 50 moderate House Republicans to try to bring them on board, because as the president makes changes to satisfy the conservatives, the moderates are now beginning to drift. So it's a very fine line that he's walking. Just a little while ago, he had a group of truckers and trucking CEOs over to the White House with their big rigs on the South Lawn. The president was sitting down to talk health care with them just as he got the news. At that point, the president thought there was, in fact, going to be a vote tonight. Listen.
Today, the House is voting to repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a very close vote. After we repeal and replace Obamacare, and by the way, it's close not because Obamacare is good, it's close for politics. They know it's no good. Everybody knows it's no good. It's only politics, because we have a great bill, and I think we have a very good chance.
And it was just moments after that that the president was informed by a member of the press pool that the vote indeed had been delayed from tonight and postponed maybe until tomorrow or maybe until Monday. The one group that the president's got to really win over here, and there you see them walking across West Executive Drive, is the Freedom Caucus, the 30 or so conservative Republicans on the House who are saying that they don't like this bill because it still contains the regulatory framework of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. They want the president to rip that out. But if he does that, then there's a potential that he's going to start to alienate some of those moderates that he's got over to the White House. At any rate, Mark Meadows, who is the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, says even though he said last night on Hannity that it looked like they had the framework of a deal, that he's not there yet. Listen to what he said in the House just a short time ago.
This artificial deadline that we have at this particular point of a vote tonight actually is something that we imposed on ourselves. And I'm optimistic that we can find common ground with at least 51 or 52 senators. I am still a no at this time. I'm desperately trying to get to yes.
Still a no at this point, but trying to get to yes, Dana. But it's unclear what the president is going to have to give him to get him and the rest of the Freedom Caucus members to yes. Again, the more he gives the conservatives, the more he stands to alienate the moderates, and the more he might run up against the Byrd rule in the Senate, which limits the changes that you can make in a reconciliation bill. This is really kind of getting down in the weeds, but they think they've got a formula to do that at this point. They're going to suggest that the regulations that are in the Affordable Care Act, that are now in the new American Health Care Act, are indelibly tied to the Obamacare subsidies, and that if you get rid of the subsidies, as this new bill would do, you've got to get rid of those regulations as well. It's an interesting and clever argument that they're making, and one that I'm sure Democrats are going to oppose all the way to the bank. Dana?
All right, John, thank you so much for teeing all of that up for us for our discussion. Kimberly, you cannot fault the president of the United States for not trying. I mean, he's tried to get everybody there, but I think as they tried to make it more palatable to the House Freedom Caucus, he ran the risk of losing some moderates who are also in tough districts. A lot of the guys in the House Freedom Caucus are not, so these votes get harder to get. So I think that's why they had to postpone it.
Yeah, it's really tricky, and there's some trust issues there where people were worried also, was McConnell going to mess them over, and if they voted for it, and what was going to happen. So I think this is tough because, like you mentioned yesterday, President of the United States coming, you want to have him come strong out of the box, be able to get this through, but that's not turning out to be the case despite his best efforts. I think he was also, relying on his staff, relying on Paul Ryan to be able to get this through, which was promised. And so they fell short. So you have to look at why are they falling short? What was this missing that wasn't palatable enough? They certainly had enough time to, think about it. And it would have been great if they could get this through. Maybe it's going to happen tomorrow. It certainly won't be for lack of effort from President Trump, Vice President Pence. Everybody was picking up the phone and calling,
and everybody
including
in the House.
Tom Price. Absolutely, trying to get people to switch votes.
Including the Freedom Caucus, Eric, who I think we're trying to negotiate in good faith, as Mark Meadows was saying, is that I want to get to yes, but he just felt like he wasn't going to be able to do it.
And the reason why they can't get to yes is because this bill doesn't reduce the cost of health care to the average American, the middle class and lower class Americans. And the Freedom Caucus knows it. But here's the problem, though, and I'm going to say a couple of things here that are probably going to upset some people. Paul Ryan promised to deliver a bill that would pass the House. He promised to deliver Donald Trump a health care bill that was going to pass the House. They could send it on to the Senate and get a Trump care. He delivered something that wasn't ready. He should have waited. He could have taken his time, or he could have incorporated the Freedom Caucus into the development of the plan, which he didn't. If you remember, Rand Paul knocking on doors saying, I want to see the bill. I can't see the bill. And the reason was because it was done behind closed doors. My problem is it sounds a lot like what we went through in 2009, 2010 with the Louisiana Purchase and the Cornhusker kickback. Now I'm going to say, by the way, day one this bill came out, I happened to be on Outnumbered. Kevin Sorbo was supposed to be on. They said, this is a health care bill. We need someone to talk about health care. So I went on and I read it within minutes, and it said this is dead on arrival because of that reason, because there was no demonstrable lowering of the cost of health care to average Americans. It was dead on arrival. Now I'm going to say the part that's probably going to tick off a lot of people. This is a win for Donald Trump. It may look like a loss, and the Democrats are going to paint it like a loss, but it's a changing of the guard. I've been talking about this for the better part of 2 years now. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell promised a health care bill that was going to pass and get through, and it didn't, and it's not. So what it looks like to me is Trump promised change. He's getting change. The establishment, old school Republicans in D.C. have to relinquish that control, go back to the drawing board, get something more conservative, and bring it to the American people.
So relinquish control, what would that look like?
Well, don't demand that this is a bill that the American people are going to like and end up having two major voting groups for Donald Trump having massive increase in health care costs and expect them, A, to eat it, and B, to want to re-elect Donald Trump in 2020.
Bob, do you think that they could have crafted a bill that could pass the House that would also meet the president's request, was that people who wanted health insurance could get health insurance, like sort of the universal access, but with competition?
No, I don't think they could. And I think that's really the problem here. They can talk all they want, but there is a fundamental divide between the Freedom Caucus and the rest of the Republicans, and I don't think there's any way to put it together. You can do cross-state lines. You could even do tort reform. That's not going to be enough for them because Eric points out the cost of health care, which Donald Trump promised was going to go lower.
That would reduce the cost to the point where the Freedom Caucus would jump on board. But you can't do it because you need a 60-vote Senate majority to get that state line.
You've got a flawed bill. The other thing is this bill was moved very quickly, very secretly, and they did not include people in it to put it together, and including Donald Trump, by the way, who came in at the end. He just said, okay, fine, Paul Ryan's got this, I'm for it.
Well, promises were made to him that was going to happen.
The idea that this is not a loss for Donald Trump, I couldn't disagree with more. The fact of the matter is, he's the one who signed on this bill. He pushed it. He's had more meetings on it than anything else he's had, and he didn't get it through. Now, will they get it through tomorrow? If they do, it's going to be a bill that I just can't imagine what it would be like. And then you got the Senate, and the Senate's already got enough votes to defeat what's in the House bill. And frankly, I think anything that would be added on to the House bill. So
as I watched this today, I thought of your point, Greg, that it's just once you provide an entitlement or a bill that makes people feel like they are getting something that they deserve from the government, it is just hard to pull it back.
It's true. It's like I said, you push an elephant into a hole, you can't get the elephant out of the hole.
You've tried.
Yes. I'm more interested in what happened to Kevin Sorbo. Frankly, what happened?
I don't understand that part.
He was outnumbered, and this bill literally came down at like, I don't know, right around 10 o'clock in the morning, and they said, I happened to be in the building, they said, look, we just want to go hardcore healthcore on this thing, health care on during the hour.
And we need one lucky healthy guy.
And I literally ran down the hallway and
bumped
did it.
Hercules.
Hercules.
Poor Hercules. I saw him on Times Square. He was drunk as a skunk.
Great guy.
I love Sorbo. He's got a movie coming out. Be sure and see it. Anyway, I don't know if it's good or bad that they put this off. It's like a final exam when you find out that they put it off a day and you go, oh great, more time to study. But you don't study. You watch 12 episodes of Law and Order. That's what you do. And you prolong the agony. Yes. The test doesn't get any easier. I think they should have the vote, get it over with. The one thing I have to say, though...
And you eat a lot of Otter Pops.
Exactly. Well, you ate the Otter Pops. I ate something else.
We weren't together.
It shows you the difference between right and left. The left constantly says how they're for transparency. But the right actually is about as transparent as you can get. I mean, they had this fight It's like an open kitchen where you're allowed to see the sausage being made. That's what you saw in the last 3 weeks with the Obamacare repeal and replace. But the Democrats, they prefer a backroom kitchen, you know, where they butcher a horse and they call it a chicken.
Yeah.
What do you think they did? They put this thing together, about 5 of them in the back room.
No, Bob, that's so funny because at least we knew what was in this bill. This was not moved quickly. It wasn't moved secretly. I can explain this, the 3 steps before with Obamacare. That was done in the dead of night.
No, but
nobody even read it.
That was after they released what the bill was. But leading up to that bill, and I remember Rand Paul walking down the halls of the House saying, I want to read the bill that's supposed to be the next Obamacare. That's going to be the Trump care replacing Obamacare. And it was under lock and key. He wasn't even allowed to see it.
We showed the video.
Yeah, that was... But can I just... But
it shouldn't have come to this to begin with. This is the problem.
The wheeling and dealing that's going on right now reminds me a lot of what went on in 2009.
But he's a deal maker.
Remember, there was
that was the whole point of Trump. He was a deal maker who listens and finds a solution.
Remember, the bill was going to have to sit for 72 hours for all members on both sides of bicameral to read it and understand it before they voted on it. Now we're trying to say, hey, maybe tomorrow or not. I don't know.
The president flipped a bunch of votes.
Deal making.
Well, that's the point. I find this that he's still. It's not his fault. It's not. It's never his fault. Right?
It's not his fault.
But he's a deal maker.
No. This is Paul. Let's make no mistake. This is on Paul Ryan, not on Donald Trump. Paul Ryan promised a bill that was going to be good enough to pass the House, and he presented something that can't even get through the House. The reason why Paul Ryan canceled his 3:30 presser today, he knew he didn't have the votes. And that is Paul Ryan, not Donald Trump.
So the deal maker didn't get the deal, but it's not his fault.
Well, not yet. I mean, give it time. In the way that they're talking about doing it, John Roberts alluded to it. You have Vice President Pence oversee the process where you wipe out that rule where you need 60 votes for the across state lines.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of that, bring it to the front of the deal, and you get the Freedom Caucus.
I think Kevin Sorbo would disagree with you, Eric.
And what if you lose a bunch of moderates? And you're in the same position.
Well, today, the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee addressed his decision to disclose information about incidental interception of Trump team communications without telling his colleagues first. Listen.
I know they're concerned, and I understand that. I mean, look, that's why I thought it was important yesterday for me to talk to all of you, to say that I was going to go let the president know this before I went over there. It was a judgment call on my part, and that's at the end of the day, that's, you know, sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you make the wrong one, but you got to stick by the decisions you make.
Representative Nunes maintains there was some kind of incidental collection by U.S. intelligence and says more information will come out hopefully by tomorrow. He privately apologized to his Democratic colleagues today for leaving them in the dark a bit, but that may not be enough for some of them. Here's Ranking Committee member Adam Schiff.
We need to do a real investigation of this, and we need to do it credibly. We can't have our chair acting as a compromise, as a surrogate for the administration. He has to either have the surrogate role or the chairman role, but he can't do both.
And KG, in the, I guess he's saying in the interest of transparency, as Greg points out, he went and wanted to get the information out there, and I guess Schiff feels that Nunes should have notified the rest of the committee prior to going public.
Right, so saying that it wasn't the right protocol that was followed, that he should have made sure to let them know before he went to the public, but then I guess he apologized for that and said perhaps he should have done it or handled it differently. Nevertheless, that does not affect the content of the information that he was conveying. So now we have to get to the bottom of that and see what other evidence, materializes pursuant to this investigation.
It feels, and he alluded to that, Nunes alluded, that there's more coming. It feels like this is just the beginning of the first trickle of maybe a flow of information coming.
It's the incidental collection. That's not the story. It's what happened afterwards with the information. So it's like, here's a simple analogy. Let's say you're in line at confession at St. Gregory's on Hacienda in San Mateo, and your neighbor is confessing in front of you, and you just hear bits and pieces about an act with a gardener maybe. It's not your fault you overheard it. That's an incidental collection of information. It's if you broadcast it to your mother's bridge club later, that's the sin. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that it's not about the collection. That happens to everybody. It's what happened, the dissemination afterwards. And I think that's what you got to focus on. Right, Dana?
Well, yeah, I think, but more information, I think, means that both of these stories are going to be fueled. And so the underlying questions about collusion, and you've got this alleged collusion with Manafort and former people that were close to Trump on the campaign and running the campaign and what they were doing. And then you had the leaking of the names that were unmasked in the report, or just one, or maybe there was others. I do think that Nunes apologizing to his colleagues was the right thing to do. It really sullied the investigative process, and if they want to keep this on the Hill, which I think they should, if you support President Trump, you should want this to not go to a special prosecutor. They should just figure out a way to work professionally with each other, like the Intelligence Committee always should. Just keep it above board. I don't think anyone has anything to worry about in terms of like getting in trouble, except for if you're just constantly trying to help prove them right on this wiretapping or surveillance issue, you're going to actually get eventually to the underlying issue, which is not just why you went. It's why you went to confession in the first place. That's yet another story.
You don't want to know.
Bob,
You'd be there all week.
Would you agree that there's a lot more there coming out of this story?
Oh, I think there's a lot more there about the Russian connection, sure. But I think what
I'm actually talking about the legal or less than legal surveillance.
Well, first of all, I mean, let's get back to what Schiff said about Nunes. I mean, you cannot be a surrogate for the White House and chairman of the Intelligence Committee. This is unprecedented in the intelligence committees, and I can't for the life of me imagine how the public would take any finding from a Nunes committee-led committee that they would consider to be accurate, fair, and non-Trump. It's got to have a special prosecutor. There's a lot here, and why not get it off the Hill, put it in the hands of a special prosecutor? Why? Because Trump and his people are afraid to death. They're going to find out that the Russians and the Trump team colluded on this election.
Well,
do they need, in fact, a special prosecutor? I would say that they can probably handle this on their own.
I think they can totally handle it on their own, and they just need to like push forward in a professional way, maintain the ethics and the integrity of the investigation, and get to the bottom of it. I mean, American people deserve to know exactly what happened. And there was something interesting in what Nunes reported, saying that the surveillance did not involve the ongoing FBI inquiry into Russia's alleged involvement. So therefore, if they were capturing stuff from of an American citizen and it did not have, intelligence value, that identity should remain secret and the information should be discarded in this incidental collection.
Do you think this was professionally done? Do you think this was professionally done?
Which was?
What Nunes did. I mean, he's getting attacked from left and right at home, and people are saying
Can I say this then, Bob? Who leaked Michael Flynn's name?
Who leaked it?
Yeah.
Probably the White House.
Well, why don't we have a special investigator to find out?
Why don't we have a special prosecutor and get it out of the hands of these right-wing nuts who are doing it?
I mean, you want special prosecutors when you think you've targeted one thing, but you don't want to unearth what was going on that was illegally done.
Nothing more.
His name was illegally leaked.
Who?
Flynn.
Well, because Flynn was doing illegal things.
No, Bob.
Again, and that's the difference that Greg pointed out. It's not the act. It's the act, the leaking that is also
How do we know? Flynn was on the phone enough times. He probably got picked up. What's the difference? We know he did it. We know he talked to the.
Where was Kevin Sorbo in all this?
Welcome back to the Five. We turn now to yesterday's devastating terror attack in London. We now know the identity of the madman who killed 4 people and himself was also killed. The death toll just rose. More than 24 injured. His name is Khalid Massoud, a 52-year-old Brit with a long history of violence. We also learned today one of the victims who was killed was an American. His wife was also injured. More now from our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Harris. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Bob. Yes, just in the last 15 minutes, confirmation that a 4th civilian was killed in that attack. As we learn more about the suspect, 52-year-old Khalid Massoud was known to police with his criminal record and history of extremist views. But British authorities say there was no intelligence tying him to an imminent plot. The assault bears the hallmarks of what counterterrorism analysts call a marauding attack. That's when an individual who is self-radicalized acts alone or with a small cell and turns everyday items into weapons. These plots are among the hardest to disrupt, and the British trained to quickly neutralize the suspect and limit the loss of life. The British did not go public with the suspect's name until this afternoon, with a former Army intelligence officer telling Fox it's likely part of an investigative strategy.
I totally understood the British government's decision not to release the name of the terrorist because they wanted to arrest the rest of his network before they splashed the name everywhere and the network knew enough to flee. And I think that's what you saw with the overnight raids in Birmingham as they exploited some of the intelligence they received from the attack.
Kurt Cochran from Utah is among the dead, and his wife Melissa seriously injured. The couple celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary when they were mowed down by that SUV on Westminster Bridge. This claim of responsibility today comes from the Amaq News Service. This is the ISIS media outlet. They call the 52-year-old a soldier of the Islamic State, though the tweet offers no direct evidence Masood was recruited or trained by ISIS. Bob.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you, Eric, yesterday there was sort of left the impression this was a madman who was maybe had ties to ISIS but was acting alone. And overnight they arrest a network of people, which means that this was probably planned out well in advance.
Or may not have been planned out, but the point is, once again, it's another ISIS-inspired attack, whether he was working with ISIS or he was homegrown jihadi that decided he wanted to fight for the cause.
They claimed the attack, though.
Oh, they did. I know they did, but they do that a lot. I mean, it's perfect for them. They can create more fear and terror within London. But I just have to do that. I hope it's not too early to do this while we mourn these victims. Again, this was a man who took his car and a knife and ended up killing 4 innocent victims. No gun involved at all. So when you see him here and you have the left coming out all outraged about gun violence, it doesn't really matter. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger. It's the human being that does it. It's not the terrorist. I mean, it's not the car or the knife that kills the people. It's the terrorist that does it, as in London.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dan. They had, there was indication that the British knew about this guy. They had followed him for a while, then they let him go. It seems to me this happened last year where they had somebody they were following and then they said to let it go. Is this a failure of the intelligence community, or is it just that we can't follow everybody?
Well, I do think that there's a pattern. Kimberly could correct me if I'm wrong, but that almost all of these terrorist attacks, either here in America or overseas, you have to wait until they do something bad. And in this case, I mean, what ISIS has inspired is for people to do these types of attacks, especially this mowing down using vehicles. It's very hard to guard against, and you can see why, as a terrorist tactic, it is effective if we let it get to us.
Can't you follow these guys, though? I mean, can't you monitor them, or you don't have to necessarily pick them up?
Yes, well, yes, but again, when you think about the resources, allocation of resources from the intelligence community, we face the same problem here in terms of how many of them can you get after and keep track of. And you can't just preemptively take them in. So you have the situation here, though, which what you saw was quick work right after, right? Because they were kind of aware of the guy. Then you had MI5 working with NSA, joint operations, trying to be able to get the information from like Telegram and other encrypted devices, text messages, taking this guy's life apart. And then they start framing out and bullet pointing contacts and associates. And they were able to put this together. And as for using these type of things as weapons, I mean, this started out with, Al-Qaeda in Inspire magazine back in the 90s saying that this is the type of thing that you could do. And as far as I'm concerned these days, there is no lone wolves. People radicalize in whatever way they can. And ISIS, I think, is correct when they say that they've created a digital caliphate where they're able to connect and network and radicalize and reach people all over the place, because even the poorest amongst people have cell phones to connect.
They told me to tease, but poor Greg hasn't gotten it. Did you want to say one sentence, Greg?
Goodbye. No, civilization is always going to be at a disadvantage with this. We are always playing catch up. As we harden a soft target, as we plug a hole, terrorists will always find new holes to fill. And the thing is, a failure to fight terror is a failure in diligence, but it's also a failure in imagination. You have to continually think like a terrorist. You have to think about, how do you make something deadly? For example, a box cutter plus a plane created a missile. That never happened before. And the one thing I want to bring up I fear that we're suffering from I call it visual dysmorphic disorder. And this is this belief that lighting candles and making heart-shaped symbols with your hands is somehow an effective action against evil. And while it's a lovely sentiment and to show support for the people that are suffering, you cannot stop there. You cannot say we go out and we march and we sit down and we light a candle and that's where it ends. And then we start talking about compassion and we start talking about love and we start talking about it. Then we get to Islamophobia and we totally skip the point that I just mentioned, which is hardening, soft targets, and diligence. We skip that because we're too busy preaching love and kisses.
I'm with that.
Okay, next, Bill O'Reilly tears apart
That's an upside-down heart.
What?
That's not even a heart.
It's supposed to be a heart. Is that not a heart?
But
anyway.
just go.
All right, let's keep going. Bill O'Reilly tears apart the mainstream media for ignoring the Rockville, Maryland rape story because the suspects are illegal immigrants. See that ahead.
Wow. In the tail on them. Welcome back. Two illegal immigrants were arrested last week for allegedly raping a 14-year-old girl inside a school in Rockville, Maryland. It is a huge story that all media outlets should be covering, but you haven't seen it on the big three network newscasts, ABC, CBS, and NBC. They did devote tons of coverage to the fake report by Rolling Stone in 2014 that members of a fraternity gang raped a female student at UVA. Bill O'Reilly puts the mainstream media on blast for their shameful blackout of this important story.
That is beyond anything I have ever seen in my 40 years plus of journalism. A story of that magnitude ignored by the national media. We all know why. Illegal immigration is a political issue. President Trump has made the apprehension of undocumented criminals a top priority. We have a president who vows to stop the illegal alien criminal madness, but we have a media that openly opposes that, allowing the sanctuary movement to pretty much run wild.
Okay, Eric, so there's been a lot of discussion about this, and you've seen, obviously, this story covered on Fox News, as it should be, and you can harken back to the time when the UVA story of the rape that didn't occur was given widespread attention all across the mainstream media. Not this important story,
Yeah,
however.
and O'Reilly was fired up last night. He was really ticked off, and he made a couple of points. We may have made these points as well, but why is a 17 and 18-year-old mixed in with freshman 14-year-old girls? Why does that happen? That was a clear failure. This is me now. This is a clear failure by the school board and the principal. I mean, there's no way that should happen. It can't happen. They have to fix that. And it may be because they're so PC, politically correct, fear of looking like they're being, I don't know, less than...
discriminatory or...
Yeah, that's mine.
It's Kevin Sorbo? Kevin Sorbo.
But the point is, look, illegals, and I'll say it again, we have this argument on this show quite a bit. Illegals commit crime, violent crime, not the crime of coming over here illegally. They commit violent crime after they're caught at a far higher rate than the national population, somewhere around 4 times the number that they actually represent.
All right, Dana, so...
you want to... I don't think that's true. I looked it up.
No, I did. Well, unless the brain room is wrong, so...
Yeah, I got... the high rates of legal or illegal not linked to crime spikes. From 1990 to 2013, the illegal population tripled, but crime declined 48%. Murder, rape, and assault.
On the federal level...
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing national level of violent crime.
I will send you the info. It's almost 4 times.
I got mine today not from the Fox News brain room. I got it from an independent source. But maybe the brain room has a different source than I do.
Maybe they do.
But one rape, the UVA rape, was false, but it fit into a liberal feminist narrative.
Yes.
Which is why it was widely reported and accepted. Plus, you have the argument that whether or not it's false, it doesn't matter because it's true somewhere else. That's the article they always use. And to your point of why it happened, romantic progressive ideals won over common sense. So they were allowed to take 2 18-year-olds, mix them with young girls because they said they couldn't speak English, so they couldn't go to a higher grade. So they thought, oh, let's help them, when in fact, without seeing with their common sense that this was a bad idea.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a huge problem there, Dana, in terms of why are they entitled then, you know, to get that education at the risk of public safety and at the expense, personal safety of young, you know, kids in the school.
Well, it might be a law that has to be revisited.
Yeah.
It was in 1992 that the Supreme Court decided, based on a resource issue, that it wasn't about a public safety, it was about resources and expenditures. But in that case, in 1982, the Supreme Court said there would be more harm if you do not educate them. So that's why these school districts do that. I don't think it's appropriate to put 18-year-olds in with freshmen, but I also imagine from a resource standpoint that school's like, well, where else are we going to put them because they have to be in a remedial English class. There's all sorts of problems here. I would say that because of the publicity on sanctuary cities and the concerns, also about when you look at President Trump and the push he has made, the movement is against sanctuary. So the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, has said that if the state of Maryland sends him a bill about sanctuary, making it a sanctuary state, he would veto it. And you saw mayors in Florida saying, we're not going to do the sanctuary thing anymore. So there is actually a movement against sanctuary, which will probably grow.
Yeah, well, I'm against sanctuary schools. I mean, if you're coming into this country illegally and you shouldn't be here and they should have been deported, that's where they go. Go back to school wherever you came from and don't make it an obligation, a taxpayer expense and a public safety expense.
So that's the county I live in, Montgomery County, probably the most liberal county in the country. It's not surprising to me that they downplayed this. It got very little local coverage, I might add, in the Washington Post and the local newspapers. It should have gotten covered. It should be covered by the mainstream media, as you call it. It should be covered by a lot of people because rape is rape, and it is, whether it's done by people who are citizens of this country or not, it is a plague on our country, and it should be reported.
Okay, great.
In a press conference on Tuesday, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced his deputies will block ICE agents from entering public schools, even though no one said they were going there in the first place. So how will he block these non-existent invaders? It's a good question. He brags about denying entry unless there's a warrant, which is how things work, you dumbass. Yep, it's an official medical diagnosis. De Blasio is a dumbass. Dumber than 6 pounds of dead flounder. No offense to dead fish. Oh, the mayor, he acts the hero, protecting the city from make-believe threats as he fails to protect us from real threats, like criminally stupid mayors. De Blasio isn't just dumb, he's dangerous, and he tries to hide it with cheap, grandstanding press conferences. See, just last week, an insane ex-con ran down a medic in her own ambulance. She left behind 5 children. The deranged killer had 31 arrests, assault, robbery, weapons charges. But worse, a judge just appointed by the mayor had the chance to hold this maniac, but let him go. Free then to murder a mom. So while Mayor McFreak fakes compassion by creating a comic book threat of ICE invaders, his bumbling, incoherent policies turn innocents into sitting ducks for madmen. Sorry, Lurch. The threat isn't from immigration agents. It's progressive punks who put politics before safety. And so in New York, madmen can roam free and even become mayor. I don't like this person.
No, come on.
No, I don't.
He's really the worst.
When is somebody at this table going to run for mayor? It's either going to be...
You keep looking at me.
No, it's either you or Eric.
Pay my bill.
Oh, no, I'm out.
Yeah.
But you can win.
You would wipe the floor with this mop.
I'd make him cry for his mother so fast. You have no idea. He's looking for a safe space, crawling in the corner.
But how can... This was all